We go into more in depth than just the history of comic books. This is where we like to talk about the culture of comic books, how they affect people, how the people affect them, the modern comic books, new writers, new directions, new ideas, diversity, all of that kind of thing. So that's kind of the fun of the Red Web. Today, talking with me is a couple of my cosplay friends. Colton over here is one of my cosplay friends. He actually is a bodybuilder. You can catch him on his Instagram if you want to follow him. It's Cole_man_of_steel. So you can guess what he cosplays as. And then my other friend over here is Michael. He's also a cosplayer, and you can find him at ATX Thor on Instagram. So if that gives you any idea. We're not going to have a Thor versus Superman showdown today. Our topic this time around is we're going to start a month off of non-traditional superheroes. We're going to talk about superheroes that are not the usual mold, not your knight in shining armor kind of characters. We're going to go into the difference between dark heroes, anti-heroes, villains that you root for, basically any kind of an protagonist that is the antagonist in the protagonist role in the literature. So to get things started, I'm going to talk about what exactly is an anti-hero. So originally, literarily speaking, an anti-hero was any hero that was that was lacking. This is a key part of the definition. An anti-hero is the protagonist who is lacking in traditional heroic traits. This was actually what they would use to refer to, especially mythology characters like Hercules. Or Heracles, actually. That's actually Heracles. But
I just saw him over there waiting.
Yeah,
Heracles.
A lot of people don't realize just, even when I was a kid reading mythology, I kind of realized how messed up classic mythology was. And Heracles is like straight up bad guy for the most part. He was completely selfish.
A good dude. He
was not a good dude. He raped an entire island of women in one night. Like, that's where all 52 of his children came from. So yeah, Heracles, not super awesome, traditionally speaking. And then, years later, they turn him into a Disney movie, which is a completely other thing. So that actually kind of brings us to our definition of anti-hero versus a hero or dark hero. An anti-hero is lacking in traditional traits. Now, the key of that is that lacking traditional traits. A lot of people kind of get that confused, and the modern audience believes that an anti-hero is somebody who has non-traditional traits. There's a difference between a hero having some of the villain's traits, like a hero who is a scoundrel or a vigilante who breaks the rules sometimes, and a villain who is just lacking the heroic traits. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, what do we call the hero that is possessing of non-heroic traits, but is still ultimately a hero? Well, that's a dark hero. And today, we're going to be discussing the difference between dark hero, anti-hero, and my new third favorite category, because literature these days is so varied, the sympathetic villain, which is basically a villain in the protagonist role that you kind of root for, the villain you root for. So, Cole, who are some of your favorite dark heroes? So the audience knows which ones are dark heroes.
So a good example of a classic dark hero is definitely the Dark Knight himself, Batman. Batman's one of the best examples you can get of a dark hero. He thinks he's doing the right thing, but he's going about it in a way that other people would view as villainous, per se.
Right.
But he ultimately is doing the right thing. He is doing the wrong thing to do the right thing.
Right. So yeah, ultimately what it comes down to is a dark hero, it's morality. Basically what it is, or the motivation. Why are they doing what they're doing? I know we had talked about earlier, before we started, I was talking to you about the difference between Batman versus Punisher.
Oh, yeah.
Both of them had a tragedy happen to them. Both of them, it's a revenge kind of thing, or vengeance. Batman's like, I am vengeance. The problem is Batman doesn't really actually get vengeance,
He has his line.
Yeah, he has his line. So even though, yes, that was the catalyst that started him on the path, he still ultimately is morally, good. He's trying to do good. He's trying to do something for the betterment of man. It all has to do with the greater good. Punisher,
on the other hand, has no limits.
Yeah, so he starts off the same way. He has a tragedy that gets him setting on his catalyst on his journey, but his motives are completely selfish. He may do heroic things, but they're only to serve his own needs. They're heroic if he wants to. He might accidentally do heroic things. He's not a hero. He kills bad guys, yes, but he does so to ease his own pain, and he may help people that remind him of his family. But again, that's a selfish reason.
Yeah, there's nothing selfless about the Punisher. That's the big difference between being an anti-hero and a dark hero. Good example, Batman versus Punisher. Batman never kills the guy who killed his parents.
Yeah.
He sits in prison, but his whole thing is he doesn't want anyone else to feel the same pain that he felt.
Right.
Whereas the Punisher, he doesn't care what anyone else feels. He doesn't care about anyone else's opinions. He's just going to make himself feel better by killing all these bad guys.
Right. Of course, you get to the modern Batman and everybody has a fit because he's killing people. It's actually kind of amusing. I don't know. I always wondered where the line was, the difference between killing somebody and allowing them to die. I know in the comic book a lot of people don't realize that there was actually the Kaiju Beast. Batman trapped him in a cave in a tunnel underground and left him there. He didn't actually kill him, but he wasn't going to come back for him. He didn't give him food or water. He was probably running out of air. He was actually, ultimately he killed him as far as I'm concerned. But I guess he didn't do it himself.
What's the line he says to Ra's al Ghul in Batman Begins?
Yes.
I don't have to kill you. I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you.
But I have to save you. Yeah, that always really
it's a
cracked
gray
me up
area there.
Well, I pointed out to my husband one time, all of the original Batman movies, all the villains die the same way. Like Joker falls to his death. Batman didn't kill him. He just falls off the cathedral. In the second one, Penguin falls into the penguin habitat. The third one, Two-Face falls down the big chasm. Yeah. Catwoman falls and dies several times, but they all fall to their death. Ra's al Ghul falls to his death. I always just find this particularly amusing. But anyway, moving on. So ultimately, it's the morality and the motivation. Now, sometimes characters, it comes down to personal opinion. Different people have a different opinion what they consider morally fit and morally just, what the line is and whatnot and everything, Some characters that I know you think are more heroic than anti-hero.
So they think are more hero than they are anti-hero?
Some that other people might not necessarily think are heroes.
There's quite a few because there's a big gray area. A good example is like when the Venom symbiote attached to Flash Thompson.
Oh yeah.
Agent Venom.
Agent Venom.
Agent Venom. He's not really villainous at all, but people still for some reason categorize him as an anti-hero.
Yeah.
No, he's just a hero.
I see that a lot in writing. People will talk about anti-heroes and they completely get them all mixed up. But there's definitely a difference, and a lot of it has to do with who the writer is, who the creative team is. A lot of it has to do with money. I talk about on the show all the time the line that we have to walk with comic books, because you have to remember, yes, it is a product. So anything that's art, it's marketed. You have to take the good with the bad, which means you have to bite that bitter pill. Sometimes the stories cater to the sales, and Venom is one of those characters. Definitely super popular. Marvel, from the beginning. I read him when he was introduced as a villain. To me, I like him better as a villain. I like him as one of Spider-Man's greatest enemies. He just makes more sense that way. But then, of course, he got popular. They started trying to make him anti-hero. Hero, he's run the gamut of it. Even the movie.
He's more of an anti-hero or dark hero in the movie than he is a
exactly.
villain. But he's not the villain in the slightest.
Oh, and they try really hard to give him sympathetic villain traits, but they don't. I'm sorry, in the movie, I don't think they did very well. I mean, ultimately, he's still a jackass guy. I don't know how else to say it.
Eddie Brock will always be a horrible human being.
He's a horrible person. Yeah, I think that's what they forget. The movie tried to make him more of a good guy in a bad situation, but no, yeah, he's just a bad person. But that's kind of what I think is interesting about the character.
I think he was even worse in the movie because he literally ruined his girlfriend's life.
Oh yeah,
because I want to get this story, and I was like, man, they're really making Eddie a jerk.
But then, of course, Sony, in the end, no consequences. They had him have every dream come true. He had everything he wanted. He got his job back. The girlfriend even kind of liked him again. Okay. That's kind of cool.
Well, any hero has that happen to him. Like even like mine and his favorites, Thor and Superman have had several occasions where they're like Thor not as much, but Superman is like the goody two-shoes of all goody two-shoes.
Yeah.
And even he, depending on who's writing him, can be a little villainous, and obviously excluding the Injustice universe where he's straight up a villain.
Exactly.
But there's times where Superman will just bite the bullet and he'll be like, you know what? I don't care about the morality. I'm killing you. And Thor does that a lot more often than Superman does.
There was a time where Thor was actually sided with Hitler for a while just because they were both from the Germanic background. And then once he realized what Hitler was doing, he...
Well, and again, that's where we come down to morality. There's a different level of morality, and that's another reason I think that some people are connected to certain characters where other people are not. For instance, soldier-type characters. You know, when you're in war, when you're in battle, there's a different kind of morality that's going there that you know, Thor, he's a warrior. He comes from a warrior, you know, and it's not the same thing. You know, Captain America even, everybody wants to make him like super goody two-shoes, Mr. Perfect.
But he's killed several people.
He's killed several people, but he killed people in wartime. You know, and that's a different thing. I think that's one of the original appeals of the Punisher character when he started off. But then they kind of, I don't know, the Thomas Jane movie, they really wanted to make him a sympathetic person. You know, the whole thing was, you know, yeah, he killed all the bad guys. He was supposed to be a hero, and that they tried too hard to make him a hero, and that's why people didn't like that movie as much. Whereas the Netflix series got it dead on.
Oh, yeah.
John Bernthal's Punisher is not a hero at all.
And he's not a hero, and that's what you don't want to watch him be a hero, you know. So that's kind of interesting too. Personal opinion, some characters, I think Iron Man was the villain of the MCU.
I 100% agree with that.
Yes, he redeemed himself at the end, but good gravy.
Ultron was his fault. The Civil War was his fault.
Yeah, it was all his fault. Everything. I'm sorry.
The reason him and Cap weren't fighting together when Thanos showed up was his fault.
Yeah, and
I'm gonna make a lot of people mad.
And and he didn't even take responsibility for it. He shifted all the blame to Captain America and the team.
He became the
sympathetic
villain. In a way.
We shouldn't get too much into stuff that happens in Endgame
because I
know it's been 2 weeks, but there's probably one person or a couple people out there who haven't seen it.
Yeah, but that's all right.
They lifted the spoiler ban, but we can still be nice about it. We can be nice.
Yeah, over time it definitely has covered very different kinds of characters and stuff. Historically having to do with like morality and everything. The main thing that I've really learned is that because there's been so much diversity in writing, characters, opinions, different points of view, from soldier side all the way to pacifist side, that the anti-hero as we know it today has evolved from the simple non-heroic traits to a broad variety of gray areas. Some of them kind of touch on all of them. The three that we're going to be talking about this month specifically are dark heroes, which are heroes that are definitely good at nature. Definitely their intention is to do good for the greater good. That's their motivation. But they do have traits or do things that would not be considered necessarily heroic. You know, like difference between Batman and Superman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then we'll talk about straight up anti-heroes. Anti-heroes as, and that's the thing that a lot of people confuse. Anti-heroes are neutral. Like if you're talking in, Venom and Deadpool. If you're talking in D&D terms, this would be chaotic neutral versus, chaotic good. They can go either way. The whole thing about an anti-hero is that you read the story and they could either end up being a hero by the end of it, they could end up being slightly more villainous, or they could just learn nothing and they could be in the same place that they start. No change at all. That's kind of the interesting thing about it.
Or they can be a Rob Liefeld created monstrosity who just throws chimichangas
or just a snowball that just keeps picking up things in its path and adding on.
There's a post going around that said Liefeld did nothing wrong, and I'm like, Liefeld did everything wrong.
Oh goodness. Yeah. Talking about like rip off of a rip off of a rip off. Even I find the Harley Quinn's boyfriend now amusing. The Red Tool. It's like, so we have a parody of a character who was essentially a parody of a character in DC to begin with. So yeah, that's kind of an amusing part to me.
Have Red Tool and Deathstroke ever met? I would really like to see that confrontation.
No, there was a Deadpool character that did meet Deathstroke. I can't remember when the issue was. I just remember that it was funny because it was Deadpool basically, but he was in Deathstroke's colors, so it was orange and blue, but it was like the Deadpool costume, and it was just for one issue. It was like a throwaway character. But every time he tried to introduce himself, he would get the det out something would happen and he got cut off. So he kept trying to say his name, but he never got a chance to actually say his name. But it was basically the creators were like, yeah, we know you stole this character from us. Don't forget it. But I don't know.
They didn't get in trouble because they never finished his name.
Yeah, that's true. And they never actually said it. I don't know. So what do you think are the appeals of these characters? Why do people like them nowadays? You know, back in the day when comic books were created, it was all about wish fulfillment and superheroes and mythology and going beyond human limitations. And now that where our culture just eats them up, Deadpool did unprecedentedly well. Wolverine, they really, Logan.
Everybody loves Loki now.
Everybody loves Loki, and he's definitely more a sympathetic villain.
Women ages of 15 to 35.
Right.
I think it even goes further than that.
Yeah, I honestly, it really does. But I think it's actually because comics started at that lighthearted and wanting to reach these levels of godhood kind of thing. Characters like that, like even the characters who started that, Superman, Wonder Woman, Thor, they have to be more grounded nowadays to appeal to people who love anti-heroes. Because how do you think characters who literally mostly all they do is kill people and are really bad people, like Deathstroke. I love Deathstroke to death, but he's a horrible person.
Yeah.
The most selfish human being probably in the DC universe.
Oh, his kids are so screwed up. I mean, anything that has his kids in it is just messed up. Yeah.
And, like, why is that so appealing to people? Like, why is he so appealing to me? I'm like, I'm usually love the goody two-shoe. It's because it's a fantasy. It's that gray area, that horrible character that people always want to be in the back of their heads when bad things happen to them.
Yeah, we were talking
about
that.
But they never will.
We were talking about that when I was planning out the show and everything. I was thinking about those kind of things. And you're right, the wish fulfillment on the other end of the scale. You know, we all have that primal release that we want. We all want to be able to just say, you know, screw everybody, just kill them all. You know, I mean, we can't do that obviously. So you're saying that
we can't.
Yeah, so it's between making them more relatable, but also the cathartic quality of it.
I mean, the comics initially they started the good versus the bad, but now with those anti-heroes, you have more of those grayscale that's in between there, and where more people can actually relate more to. I don't relate all the way to Superman. I relate more to a little bit more of the anti-hero. You're not one side or the other. You're a little bit more of the middle ground where people more can relate to.
Yeah, and that really picked up in the 80s with the whole deconstruction of the superhero idea when they started making them more dark and trying to figure out what they would be like in the real world. Would these people really do these kind of things? I know personally, I think that there should be the contrast. I think that, yes, those characters are important, as long as you don't make everybody that character. You know, turning Superman dark is a mistake to me. You know, and you can't have the darkness without the light. You can't have the balance to do that. So I think that, yes, those are good characters as long as not everybody's that character.
Right.
However, sometimes it's just kind of fun to think, what if things had gone the other way? What's the movie coming out?
Brightburn.
Brightburn? Oh my gosh, yeah,
Brightburn,
totally.
That's why Brightburn is a big deal. That's why the Injustice universe was so popular, because, let's be real, Superman as a villain is probably the most terrifying thing that could ever happen, because how do you stop him without kryptonite?
And it's not that we don't like those characters. It's not that we don't still need superheroes or bright characters. It's just that they serve a different part. It's a
You don't want to see somebody be good all the time.
Yeah.
You don't want to see a one-note character as a thing.
You want people to have their weaknesses, and not just a physical weakness, but like an
emotional.
Yeah, because then that makes you feel like you connect better.
No.
Like even Deadpool, who a lot of people consider one note, he has his weaknesses, which is his insecurities.
Yeah.
He's a extremely insecure individual, and that's what makes him so relatable to so many people, I think.
Right.
Another example of a relatable character that's a straight-up villain is Killmonger. I know you were talking about that earlier.
Yes, definitely very popular. People came away from Black Panther going, it's like, you know, you weren't even sure who you wanted to win at one point. And that's actually what makes more compelling villains, too. You used to have straight-up mustache-twirly villains were like one-note, two-dimensional. Giving them a pathos actually makes them way more interesting. You know, I even when I was watching Smallville, I loved Lex Luthor.
Lex Luthor and Smallville is fantastic.
I loved Michael Rosenbaum, because when they were talking to him, it was at a con or something, and they were asking about, you know, why is his Lex Luthor different than other versions of Lex Luthor? And he said, because evil is a journey, not a switch you just turn off and on. You know? And people just aren't instantly evil. And I think that kind of that's what modern our characters are. You want to see that journey. You want to see them come that way. So
Dr. Freeze, he didn't start off evil.
Yeah.
Or even Doc Ock didn't even really start off
And Dr.
evil.
Freeze, you can't even... He's really not even evil. He's just doing what he has to do to save his wife. He does very, very, very bad things.
Yeah, he's definitely sympathetic villain as opposed to anti-hero, because he's definitely not trying to do anything heroic.
No,
all of
at
it
all.
is for his own benefit. But he is an antagonist and protagonist space, in that you want to see him succeed. You want him to, you don't want him to kill a bunch of people, but at the same time, you're kind of almost don't mind if it brings
You
his
feel
wife back.
bad
Yeah.
for him. You're like, man, that's horrible.
It's the sympathy part.
It's a sympathetic.
For sure.
Loki's a very sympathetic villain to a lot of people, because a lot of people understand what it's like to be in someone's shadow your entire life and then want to come out of that shadow. But no matter what you do, Loki will never leave Thor's shadow or Odin's shadow.
And that's a project of the movies for sure, but it was one that hit a note. It really kind of snowballed that sympathetic villain idea.
Through the mythology, though, he's still always in somebody else's shadow.
It's not Thor in the slightest.
When he
but-
tries to step out of that shadow and do something good, it's always overcasted by another action.
Right.
That's an interesting aspect, Michael, that you and I have talked about in the past, is that some characters that were taken from mythology into comics become good heroes and anti-heroes. Thor is a perfect example of that, because Thor in Norse mythology is a really, really bad person.
Oh yeah, yeah,
person.
yeah. I'd say
So
it's the blonde.
arrogant.
It's the blonde hair.
Hey,
Whoa.
No, seriously. Thor in mythology is actually a redhead.
Yeah.
So it's the blonde Thor is a good guy. It's the redheaded Thor that's a jerk. No, actually, people forget
Redheads.
that when Thor was originally created, and he was one of the earlier non-heroic heroes, because his original concept was that he was being punished. He was cursed. And unlike the movie where he got the hammer back after like a week or whatever, in the entire original run of the comic book, he only came out when Donald Blake allowed him to.
Yeah.
He was tied to the hammer. He had a much longer journey to overcome the what was it, the pride and the willfulness and the vanity that he was being punished for. And for a long time, he was not a really particularly likable character either. So I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Avengers are kind of a fun one in that they're definitely a contrast to the Justice League. Iron Man, coming from the war and trying to redeem his own conscience from seeing the devastation of what his weapons did. In
the movies, but also in the books, he's an alcoholic asshole.
Oh yeah. There
was a point where he was so messed up from alcohol that the Iron Man suit tossed him out because it didn't recognize him.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because of his alcoholism. And
a lot of people don't
Captain
realize that
Marvel is
Rhodey was
even
actually
worse.
Iron Man way before he was War Machine. He actually was the second Iron Man. But then there are also different kinds of anti-heroes and dark heroes too that are not quite as dark, or on the surface anyway. Harley Quinn, big popular one. Harley Quinn, Catwoman, Poison Ivy,
Black
the
Cat.
Bat villainesses. They're definitely fun one to talk about. So we're going to talk about some more of those in the next couple of weeks. Anybody particularly cool you wanted to touch on real quick?
I just want to say an example of someone who was all three. He's not comics. Don't kill me, Brad. Is Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z. Michael and I
Still
were
a
talking-
superhero.
So, to an extent, yeah, that's pretty much the anime superhero is Dragon Ball Z, but he starts off as a straight-up villain, then becomes a sympathetic villain, then becomes an anti-hero, and now, at this point, I wouldn't even say he's a dark hero, I'd just say he's a straight-up hero at this point.
But he still made his little bit of phase through the dark hero.
Yeah.
He's still in a very
But
aggressive hero.
That's kind of a lot of just writing to give the character some.
But then also, with Dragon Ball Z,
yeah.
Piccolo did the
Piccolo
same
did
Yeah.
the same thing. His was a lot faster. Another one that's not super popular, Guts from Berserk, is just straight up anti-hero the entire time, and obviously Venom. I can't not talk about my favorite
Venom, yeah, and
anti-hero
Venom
of time.
hits all of the notes on there too. So we're going to talk more about each of the different kinds in depth over the next couple of weeks. One thing I do want to make sure that we touch on is also modern definition of anti-hero is not necessarily characters that started off bad. That's kind of a thing that gets confused too. There's a lot of stories where the character starts off in a bad place, but part of the heroic journey is to become a hero, so you know he's going to become a hero at the end of the story. So that's not necessarily an anti-hero. Anti-hero ultimately is a bad person that you're rooting for all the way through.
They
So
can go villainous or hero
Yeah.
at any point in
but
the story.
ultimately it's the protagonist that's a villain. So please come back, please like us and subscribe
Yeah.
so that you can see the rest of us. Thanks, Michael Colton, I appreciate you coming in.
No problem.
Hopefully they'll come in and talk to us some more before that. We've got a lot of fun topics coming up past the dark heroes, and hope to see y'all next time. Thanks for joining us.